Abortion is easily one of the most polarizing topics in the world today. While many Christians align with a staunch anti-abortion stance and are keen to impose their beliefs on others, there's a surprising amount of scripture and theological reasoning that actually supports a pro-abortion perspective. In this video, I'm breaking down my top 10 reasons why Christians should be pro-abortion, not just pro-choice like the people on the left. No, Christians should actually be pro-abortion, and I'm about to tell you why. Whether or not you agree, these arguments are grounded in theology, logic, and compassion. So let's get started. Number 10, Christianity is about saving souls, not legislating. Jesus never called his followers to impose moral laws on others through government. Instead, he focused on personal transformation and spreading the gospel. Christians should do as Jesus and focus their efforts on spreading his word rather than legislating their dogma. Hell, if they spent half as much time fighting child SA in the Catholic Church and Southern Baptist Church as they do on abortions, so many children could be spared so much pain and suffering. But nope, abortion is the hill they decide to die on. You could almost argue that by forcing women to have children, these mega cults are actually intentionally increasing their pool of potential victims. That line of thinking may be insulting to some, but their histories justify such criticism. Number 9, criminalizing abortion harms women. History shows us that banning abortion doesn't stop it. It just makes it more dangerous. Women, often desperate and marginalized, turn to unsafe methods that jeopardize their lives. Christians are called to protect the vulnerable, but anti-abortion laws often do the opposite, putting women's health and lives at risk. How can Christians justify such policies that actually increase suffering rather than reduce it? Unironically, for the followers of an evil God monster, many Christians seem to think the women and their families deserve whatever suffering they may endure. Number 8, non-Christians are held to a different standard. The Bible often distinguishes between the laws for believers and non-believers. Forcing Christian moral values on those who don't share their faith is both ineffective and contradictory to biblical teachings. Abortion laws often disproportionately affect non-Christians, raising the question, is it truly Christian to impose such standards on people who don't even subscribe to the same beliefs? Christians often preach a live and let live or you do you boo mentality, but in reality they are always ready and eager to impose their dogmas on others. Number 7, overpopulation and stewardship of the earth. Christians are called to be good stewards of the earth, but overpopulation places immense strains on the environment and resources. More unwanted children often means more poverty, less access to education, and higher rates of environmental degradation. Supporting abortion rights could align with the biblical mandate to care for creation and ensure that the earth's resources are used wisely. Instead, Christians seem to take a God gave us this earth to destroy mentality. Number 6, preventing suffering in an overwhelmed world. Bringing an unwanted child into the world can lead to a lifetime of suffering, not just for the child, but for the parents, and makes a burden on society in general. Poverty, neglect, abuse, and systemic inequality are real consequences of forcing births. If Christians believe in alleviating suffering and showing compassion, shouldn't they support policies that prevent unnecessary hardships? Abortion, while a difficult decision, can be seen as a compassionate choice in certain circumstances. Number 5, preventing overpopulation by non-Christians. Here's a more pragmatic take. Christians often limit the decline of faith in society, but by forcing non-believers to have children they don't want, they could unintentionally contribute to a world dominated by people with opposing values. Historically, Christianity has thrived when its followers focused on strengthening their own community, not micromanaging others. Abortion access could prevent the swelling of populations that may further erode Christian influence. It would actually make more sense to have an only Christians anti-abortion stance, so they could swell their own ranks. Number 4, the Bible does not condemn abortion. Despite the modern anti-abortion rhetoric, the Bible doesn't explicitly condemn abortion anywhere. In fact, several verses suggest that life begins at breath, not conception. For example, in Genesis 2:7, Adam only becomes a living being when God breathes life into him. Furthermore, Exodus 21:22 through 25 differentiates between the value of a fetus and a living person, implying that the loss of a fetus isn't equivalent to murder. If the Bible is silent or even permissive on abortion, why are Christians so quick to condemn it? Which leads us to number 3. God performs and actually sanctions abortions. In Numbers 5:11 through 31, the Bible details a ritual where a priest administers a potion to a woman suspected of infidelity. If she's pregnant with another man's child, the potion causes her to miscarry. This is essentially a divinely sanctioned abortion procedure. Additionally, throughout the Old Testament, God takes direct actions to end pregnancies or kill children as part of his judgment. If God himself utilizes abortion as part of his divine plan, who are you, Christians, to oppose it outright? How dare you? Number 2, guaranteed heaven for the unborn. What happens to the souls of the unborn when they die? Jesus died to free us from original sin, or so they say, and many Christians believe unborn children are free from personal sin, thus guaranteed a place in heaven. Shouldn't this be what Christians want? But if they force that child to be born into this sinful world, the longer it goes through this life full of temptations, moral failures, and the possibility that it may reject the faith entirely, the more likely it is that that child will fall into sin and end up in hell. The reality is, bringing a child into this world may in fact jeopardize its eternal salvation. If the ultimate goal of Christianity is saving souls, abortion could be seen as an assured one-way ticket to eternal paradise. I wonder how many souls will be born who will then go on to sin and will end up in hell thanks to Christian anti-abortion efforts. Christians sending their own folks to hell since long before the end of Roe v. Wade. Before we get to number 1, show me you like what I do and support the channel by subscribing or even becoming a member of the channel. It really does help. I appreciate you. Now, on to number 1 on my top 10 list of why Christians should be pro-abortion. Number 1. Respecting God's given free will. Christianity places tremendous importance on free will. God allows humans to make their own choices, even if they're morally wrong, because genuine love and faith can only exist when chosen freely. In fact, often they argue that the reason God doesn't step in to stop bad people from hurting good people is because of their sacred free will. So sacred, even God himself won't cross that line. An example would be you have a sinful, bad man and he's going to do bad things to an innocent Christian girl, and despite her tear-filled prayers, God won't step in and stop him. Why? Because that man's free will is so valuable to God that he'll let that man do anything he wants to that innocent child. Isn't her free will, the free will not to be harmed, at least as valuable as his? If Christians believe in respecting God's design for human autonomy, wouldn't that extend to the decision of whether or not to have a child? By opposing abortion, some Christians might inadvertently be undermining one of the most fundamental aspects of God's gift to humanity, free will. A woman's free will to do what she wishes with her body. So there you have it, my top 10 reasons why Christians should be pro-abortion. And Christians, if you're clutching your pearls right now and you're crying out, what about the children? Well, need I remind you that your God has no problem unaliving children in the most horrific of ways. From the drownings in the flood of the Old Testament to being ripped apart by bears, the Almighty is quite actively for unaliving children. Oh, bears, you ask? Remember the story of Elijah and his curse in 2 Kings 2:23 through 25, which caused 2 mother bears to rip apart 42 young boys. For what horrific sin were these children mauled to death by bears? For simply taunting a bald man, a prophet of God. And sure, Elijah may have cast the curse, but it was the power of God that carried it out. Christians, look at the actions of your God. Doesn't it seem more like the actions of a pit demon than a loving, merciful God? Click over here and watch my video on the top 10 reasons the God of Christianity is a pit demon. Let me know what you think. Sin safely, my friends. Take care.